First off, this is not a response to integral math. I'm just going to present some more stuff on the topic from last time. The reason it isn't a response is because he is not interested in debating this. He just keeps repeating that he has more experience and I'm young and I think I know everything. That is a pretty good indication that someone has no point and is just trying to bully you. Also, he won't grant the basic psychological premise because I argued it with a thought experiment. He doesn't consider the whole book devoted to the subject that I brought up as relevant because the author hasn't published many papers. I'm not sure what sort of grounds that is for dismissal, but he clearly doesn't take his claim about his experience seriously, or else this book would be compelling evidence, as the author has been teaching for more years than he has been alive. I guess experience only counts for him when it works in his favor. So my goal for this post is twofold. I'll first explain why you can't rely on experience to inform you of good teaching practices, and then I'll explain some of the actual studies that have been done that illustrate the principle I argued for last time. This should be immensely obvious to anyone that has sat through my bias series, but I'll do it specific to teaching here since there are studies that make this case particularly interesting. The first thing to point out is that when you teach, there are probably hundreds or thousands of variables between weeks and semesters that you are not controlling for at all when just trying to feel out what helps people learn and what doesn't. You know, a student could be mildly ill, or the week is sunny and so they're in higher spirits, which causes a more significant work ethic, and on and on and on. The variables are just infinite. There's absolutely no way you can pin down one tiny thing. For instance, whether or not telling students a task is difficult affects their learning based on experiential data. You have to control for this variable. Stop arguing immediately with someone if they make this claim, or point this out to them, and if they realize their mistake, then you can probably continue the argument. Let's just suppose, for instance, that you can get reliable data somehow. It's impossible, but let's just suppose for argument that you can. Well, how do you interpret this data? The main way is that you will have something that you think is an effective teaching practice, and then you'll try to see if it is with your data. This is exactly how confirmation bias happens. So even if you somehow get reliable data, you still have to overcome confirmation bias. So now let's just suppose somehow that you get reliable data and you've overcome confirmation bias. There is still a problem. You are basing everything on what students say are effective techniques for them. This is where things get interesting. A study recently reported at an American Educational Research Association meeting by Catherine Rawson at Williams College shows that students are greatly mistaken about what helps them learn. For instance, a student might think and tell you that it was good to know that the class would be difficult, when in fact that was something that hurt their ability to learn. The reason is quite simple. This knowledge gave them comfort when they were stuck, so it felt like it was helpful, when in fact that knowledge may have been the thing that got them stuck in the first place. So student testimonials about what works are unreliable, and hence even unbiased, reliable experiential data that is based on student reactions still doesn't help you decide what is effective. You have to look to the studies that are actually controlling for these things. So let's do this. Does telling someone something is hard actually make the task harder? Well, there's an entire branch of psychology and a huge amount of literature on this subject, and it is called attribution theory. The studies done on this repeatedly confirm that this is exactly what happens. Attribution theory is an attempt to explain why it happens, but note that we observe in studies that this indeed happens to most people. This is not some off-random chance that one person every couple of years is affected. So what is attribution theory? Essentially, it says that our success at certain tasks is reliant on what we attribute success and failure to. What happens in this particular case is that when you say the material of a class is difficult, you are telling the student to attribute their struggles to something external to them. So when they hit their first struggling point, they lose motivation to keep pushing through it because they aren't attributing the ability to succeed to their own work ethic. Ironically, someone posted an example about a runner in the comments that integral math dismissed, but it seems several psychology textbooks explain the theory using running as an example. Suppose a runner is training to break a certain time barrier. For instance, they're trying to run a 20-minute 5K. If they think the goal of 20 minutes is difficult, then they are likely not to succeed at breaking it. They are attributing the difficulty to an external source. If they attribute the difficulty as possible to overcome based on hard work, they are more likely to succeed. We actually see this happen in real life all the time in sports. There are certain barriers that have been considered impossible to break by humans, especially in running. People try and try and try, and it seems that it really is impossible. Yet, as soon as the first person breaks it, almost instantaneously many other people are able to as well. This is exactly the principle we're talking about. The athletes thought the goal was impossible, but once they realized that with hard work it is possible, they could overcome the difficulty of doing it. So I should point out that I said in the comments to Integral Math that this sort of thing occurs all over real life, and he made lots of joking, sarcastic, supposed counterexamples to boost his ego. It was a little disturbing and scary to me that something that is so fundamental in so many other areas of teaching like sports or music, both of which I've spent a good deal of time teaching and being taught, would be so foreign and silly in his mind that he could dismiss it easily. That he would be so out of touch with reality that he would think attitude and confidence would have no effect on someone's ability to do something. His pet peeve is apparently teachers saying math is easy, but my two are teachers thinking that their experience actually informs them about good teaching practices and telling their students something is hard before they even try it. This is really one of the key reasons math education is so poor in this country. Our cultural attitude is that math is hard and people will fail. If we don't start trying to overcome that, then it will keep manifesting itself.